we shall start with the land of St.Annes being built on now,
Yes,
I think. And
yes.
firstly, the existence of the parish church.
Yes, well, of course, that was an amazing story. I think just it was a time of Eleanor Clifton, and people living around hay houses, because it was hay houses, really, before St.Annes was formed, hay houses and cross slack that we've already referred to. Just a few people living around this area that was to become St.Annes. They were farmers and fisher folk.
Why was the church built originally?
Well, Eleanor Clifton didn't like these rough farmers coming into her church at Bentham, because her church, St. Cuthbert's, was a little bit elitist. And going along Hayhouses Lane, particularly, for example, on May Day. On May Day, the people of Hayhouses and the Cross-Slack people were expected to attend St. Cuthbert's Church. And a procession would come along Hayhouses Lane, and they'd pass the traditional trawl boat inn. And the men in the procession would say, "You carry on to the church, love, we're just nipping in for a quick pint." Well, they got in there, they never got to church. They stumbled out in a reckless manner to join the procession going back to their farms and things. And there was no end of trouble. One day, Lady Drummond, that was sort of Lady Eleanor's mother-in-law, she was coming past in her carriage, and there was a fight going on outside the trawl boat, and noise, and the farmers, instead of getting on with their work, they were in the pub getting drunk. Oh, she thought, this is terrible. So she withdrew the licence of that pub. So the locals were very upset, particularly the people who live around hay houses, very upset. And Lady Eleanor had a word with her husband, the squire, and said, "Look, we better get a church built in amongst that area." So Squire Clifton, he said, "All right," and he gave a triangular plot of land, 2.5 acres, for the church to be built on. Just at that time, Lady Eleanor Clifton had just come into some money. Her auntie, Lady Anne Bentham, had just died and left her a whole load of money. So using that money, she used that money to build the church. Well, that was around about 1869, 1870, you see. And so she said, right, we're going to use his money to build the church. And she said, we're going to build it of brick. And the brick, she decided the brick was going to come from the Martin Fold. The Martin Fold was just the other side of Madnut Corner, the other side of Division Lane, where the Shovels pub is now.
Right.
The Shovels pub was the site of Martin Fold, and there was a big clay pit there.
Really?
And,
what was that?
And that was in the area, just where the pub is, the Shovels pub, and the land just behind was a huge clay pit. And they'd got a kiln going there, and the brickmakers made all these handmade bricks for the church and for other buildings, of course.
Yeah.
And when you look round this area, you can see that the parish church is a different colour brick to many of the other properties. And so to give a bit of incentive to the locals, she turned round to the local farmers and she said, right, the first person to bring a load of bricks and put it on the site, I'll give that person £1. Well, £1 in those days was a lot of money. So there's a mad rush to the brickworks at Martinfold. And the first few arrived almost level as they tipped the bricks on site. So fair dues, they were all very sporting. They shared this pound between them. And then during the course of the next few years, so the church rose up. So that it was opened about 1873. And the church was dedicated after Anne Bentham, who'd left the money for the church to be built. So they called it St.Annes Parish Church.
Ah.
So then you lead into this group of business people who came from the Rosendale Valley. They always say that it was somebody, one of the business people walking along the beach from Blackpool to Lytham. But the train had started it all up, really. These business people who'd got mills in the Rosendale Valley, in Haslingden and Helmshaw, they came, looked at this area and thought, what a wonderful place to build a new town. Somewhere where their children could go to school, where their wives could come to the seaside and breathe clean air. So they made inquiries with the Clifton estate, with the agent there, Thomas Fair, and say, hey, you know, we've got an idea to develop this land, like, how, you know, are you amenable to us renting a plot of land? And Thomas Fair had already, he was a go-ahead guy, he'd already got thoughts because they'd seen how the land had developed, and they thought he had already got his own plans out for developing a housing estate, if you will, around there. So they mutually agreed and monies were handed over, and so the St.Annes Land and Building Company was formed in about 1874, and they laid out the plans, and so to get the centre was the centre of the square, St.Annes Road West. And the first line to start with was to get one of the local farmers from Hayhouses Lane who got a horse-drawn plough, and already from where the church is, there was a farm track up to Hayhouses Lane where the school was for the locals.
Yeah.
That was called School Lane.
Yeah.
Well, they lined up with that, and the fellow with the horse-drawn plough, he ploughed a furrow from that point straight through to where the pier is now. They used that line to develop from. So they are there as a centre point, starting at where the church is. From the church through to the pier was 1 mile. Then half a mile either side, so you go half a mile one way to St Thomas's Road, half a mile the other side to St Leonard's Road, and there you've got your square mile. But then the thing was to develop the square. And so what happened, they developed through there, that centre line. The road wasn't made up, the roads weren't made up until the buildings were up, so it was a massive building site with sand and piles of bricks, etc. And some of the first buildings to go up were, well, where W.H. Smith's is now in the square. Those are all houses, a stretch of houses designed by Maxwell Chooke. The two architects, I think they came from Bolton. Maxwell Chooke, they were the architects for Blackpool Tower. They made the name by that. And they designed and had built this hydro with long front gardens coming right down to the pavement, with great bushes and trees growing there, and business people rented places there. And when you look at it today, you can see some of the original cast iron verandas looking down onto the square. And of course they had the long front garden, and the stables would be round the back, down that cobble back street. And one of the first places to be built was the St.Annes Hotel, of course, which was always regarded as a railway hotel. And the railway stop before it became St.Annes as a railway stop, it was called the Cross Slack railway stop. But then they developed the station and called the station St.Annes on the Sea station, and so the St.Annes Hotel was built. When they started the foundations, the foundation stone was laid by little John Clifton, the grandson of the squire. They said, "Come on, John, you lay this stone." So they gave him a trowel, and silver trowel and all the rest of it. He laid this foundation stone, which in a way was really the foundation stone for the town, the start of the town. And if you go down today, it's called down to Burlington's, down to that bar.
The Rat Pit.
The Rat Pit, yes. The longest Minton tile bar in Europe.
Yeah.
Fantastic place. And then that hotel came up, and upstairs in what was the billiard room, that's where the golfers met. Because golf started in St.Annes from there, with the original St.Annes golf course, which of course was just the other side of the railway from the station.
Which was that? The Old Links or the Royal Lytham?
That ended up, it wasn't, the Royal Lytham got its name when it shifted to the new place. But in those days, it was the St.Annes golf course. And it went over farmers' fields. The farmer, I'm prattling on now, aren't I? The farmer who owned all those fields, which were behind St.Annes Road East, and spread, all those fields spread up to the Hedrum Gate farm. And that farmer was he used to rent his fields out to these golfers. And during the period, you know, once he'd got his harvest in, then they could start playing golf. I think it spread from about April to September, something like that. And he made a lot of money by just renting his land off.
Yeah.
In the end, he found it such a profitable business that it was very quickly, when he handed over that portion of his land to the golf course. And in total, he actually had, his farm was 350 acres. And to give you an idea of the size of 350 acres, the Royal Lytham St.Annes golf course, which is now there, that is 150 acres. So just by renting the St.Annes on the Sea golf course off to them, they'd have about 100 and something acres. And so come back to the square.
Yeah, the St.Annes Hotel.
Because I'm digressing, and the St.Annes Hotel and the Rat Pit. Well, of course, these golfers, very fine, they were the upper crust people of this area. In fact, people came in from distant parts of Lancashire to play golf there. And before they could go and play golf, they had to put on these red jackets. And they paid schoolboys to caddy for them, to carry all the golf clubs. And these lads who carried the golf clubs were called ratters. And so the people who carried the golf clubs, these poor people carrying the golf clubs, if they wanted to get involved in drinking, they had to go down below the St.Annes Hotel and go in the Rat Pit where the ratters were. And that's how that got its name. It was nothing to do with what you might think that it was rat infected.
Yeah.
No, the only rats were the people who were doing the caddying.
I see.
So the stories around the rat pit are completely legend. That would keep you going for
And
an
so
hour
the
or
rat
two.
pit was designed as an underbar at the early days of the...
Very much so, yes.
Yes.
And it was so prized was that for its mint and tile work that when they built the new pub, the townhouse, they kept those original foundations and built the new pub on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the square developed.
Yes.
And it's interesting that road, the St.Annes Road West, was kept very low, and then from that edge, going up to Tuke's Hydro, that we spoke about, goes up quite a high level. And a lot of the properties around St.Annes have long flights of steps going up to it.
Yes.
So either side of the square, you've got these sloping frontages going quite high up, because the people who built those were conscious of the inundations of the sea. They could imagine that one day we were going to get another equivalent of a tsunami which would come crashing through. And if that area was completely flooded, where they were living, they thought they'd be all right.
Yeah. I've got the Porrits cutting the first sod. Where
Oh,
would that be?
well, of course, that was on the first sod, was the first bit of a drainage scheme on Clifton Drive North. William Porrit came along from Haslington. He as you know, made his money spinning cotton, but he came over using stone from the Helmshore quarries in the Rosendale Valley, and he came along and he realised that we needed a good drainage scheme, and in conjunction with Squire Clifton they created the first drain along Clifton Drive, which ultimately led out to sea. But the stipulations, and if you go into St.Annes Library and look through the St.Annes Urban District Council minutes of that time, Squire Clifton said, you mustn't put anything down this drain apart from rainwater. Well, of course, it wasn't long before all sorts of soil went down those drains. And that joined up with the main drain. So that cutting the first sod was part of that drainage scheme, and also the start of the building of the Porrit houses. And for a long time, at the landward end of the pier was a big showcase with a wheelbarrow, ebony wheelbarrow with silver mounts on, and a silver spade with photographs of the Porrits and the Clifton, Squire Clifton, digging that first sod to develop those marvellous Porrit houses.
Is that wheelbarrow and things still at the pier?
No. You see, going on a few years, you remember that the pier company was taken over lock, stock and barrel by Amalgamated Property Investments, whose managing director was Gabriel Harrison, the late Gabriel Harrison. And when eventually, I think it was in the 1970s, that company collapsed completely, then all of a sudden, I don't know where it went to, that wheelbarrow and spade disappeared. And to this day we don't know what and where that wheelbarrow is and spade. But they're getting back to that first sod and all those wonderful Porrit houses. That set the standard and set the standard for the St.Annes Land and Building Company, who insisted that all properties built in St.Annes should be of a very high standard.
The history of Ashton Gardens, strangely enough.
Well, you see, we've just left talking about William Porrit, and how he was building all the Porrit houses. When he'd nearly finished doing all the building of Porrit houses, his son Oliver took over everything. And where Ashton Gardens, that's the latest name, originally when the Porrits were there it was called St. George's Gardens. And in all those early days they treated that area very much as a builder's yard. Bounding onto Clifton Drive, and you'll see early pictures of the builder's yard, and all over the place there's blocks of stone and joiners' workshops and lengths of timber. And when the rest of the gardens, some of the gardens were occupied by Cartmels, the florists, who had almost a nursery garden there, almost like the modern garden centre. And the potential to become really nice gardens was there. And the town really wanted to create some fantastic gardens there. The basis was there. There was the pond there, and a bit of landscaping had been done. And so it got to something like about 1912, something round about there, that the people of the town really were offered the chance to have those gardens. Oliver Porrit was quite willing to part with those gardens in exchange for some money, of course. But there were so few people living in St.Annes at that time that the burden on the rates would be terrible. Well, it was full in the local papers about the trouble they were having raising the money. And Lord Ashton Williamson up at Lancaster, the Lino King, he was reading our local papers. He was interested in St.Annes. So he got on to one of the councillors, John Taylor. John Taylor was a chemist, Councillor John Taylor, next to what was to become J.R. Taylor's. He was between there and the sort of bank, if you will. And he got a call from Ashton Williamson. Would he go over to have a talk about the possibility of acquiring the gardens? And at first, there was quite a bit of excitement. This councillor, John Taylor, he had to go and see Lord Ashton at Rye-Hayes. Well, he got completely mixed up and he went to Rye-Hayes in Manchester. And then someone told him that he'd gone to the wrong place altogether. He should have gone to Rye-Hayes in Lancaster. Anyway, off he went to Rye-Hayes in Lancaster, met up with Lord Ashton. He told him the story, and Lord Ashton pretty well knew the whole story anyway, and said, well, how much do you want? And John Taylor said, well, it's so many thousands. I think in those days it was something like 21,000. And straight away, Lord Ashton wrote out a cheque for the whole amount. So Councillor John Taylor got back to St.Annes and told everybody about this. Well, the church bells were ringing, the locals were celebrating, so the gardens were bought. They then became Ashton Gardens, and so the development took place. So we'll carry on. Lord Ashton just wrote out a cheque for the whole amount, and great celebrations, church bells ringing, great celebrations took place, and now work was to start on enhancing, clearing off all the builder's yard, starting the landscaping of Ashton Gardens.
Yeah.
And if you look at Ashton Gardens, as you come in through the main gates, for example, to the left you'll see the area sinks down into a big well. Well, to the left, plans came out to have like a crystal palace there, all of glass with bowed over the top and area for a stage at one end. Well, they worked out that that was so expensive, and drainage was the problem as well, because how do you drain the land from down below there into the main drains? So that never took off. But landscaping took place. You've got like James Pullman's sons. They were, they call them rock makers. He came in, he did a lot of landscaping. He would get hold of bits of white limestone rock from the quarry behind Grange over Sounds. And by getting hold of these bits and mixing them with cement, he could create what looked like white rockery. We've got some in our garden out there. It's so convincing. And all over Ashton Gardens you'll see all this white rockery, like the ornamental bridge going over. And when the landscaping took place, they dug out more of the lake, and the soil that they dug out created that sort of embankment that looks out over the rose garden with all the tracks going up there. And so that was incredible. Then the next thing to happen, the gardens were so wonderful. There was, in the rose gardens, I'm told, there was about 2,000 different varieties of roses. Incredible rose garden. People came over from all over the country just to admire that rose garden. That's the attraction of flowers and gardens. And today you can see such marvellous displays in Ashton Gardens.
Oh, what year was the Pavilion Theatre?
Oh, the Pavilion Theatre evolved from, I suppose about after the First World War, about 1919, 1920.
Right.
They had such celebrations after the First World War. They thought, this is peace forever. And music was encouraged, and they brought music into the gardens. They had an orchestra regularly playing in Ashton Gardens. And the people of the orchestra said, we're just playing on chairs on the grass. Can't you build us a stage? So they said, no problem. They got the local joiners to build a stage. And there they were up on the stage. Marvellous, with all the audience in sort of deck chairs listening to the music. Then they all, knowing the English weather, it rained often. So the orchestra said, hey, how about your joiners putting a roof over the top of this stage? No problem. So they put a roof over the stage. And then the next moment, a couple of years later, the audience said, well, what about us? Can't you put a roof over where we're sitting? No problem. So stumps of timber went up and they put this curved roof over the top. The audience was still not satisfied. The audience said, the wings were in a draft. Can't you fill in between those wooden uprights? So they filled in. And they ended up with a theatre. It held about 500, the audience. And then the next thing is interval. Well, can't you put a cafe on the side? So on the landward side, they built this cafe, a long cafe, a whole long length. And so there you are, you ended up with the Ashton Theatre built. No nonsense about planning permission and all this sort of thing. It developed, and that's how things worked then. Marvellous. Until, of course, you know the story.
It was all the years it went on. It was a great thing.
Oh, you had marvellous stars, which later on became radio stars. People in rep would come time after time, continuous running. They would be performing one play during the evening or afternoons, and in the mornings they'd be rehearsing for the next week's production. Very hard work. The lighting grid, it was right. They had wire wound dimmers up on a
I've
rack.
still got 4 wheels
Yes.
from that original lighting.
Isn't that interesting?
thing.
I'd like to see those. Yes.
I've got them in my garage.
And they had the pantomimes there for years. Like the dancing school would have the children dancing. Muriel Berry would lead them. And Muriel Berry would always shout up to Walter Turner, controlling the lights. She said, "Walter, I want surprise pink on all my girls." She wanted them to look healthy, you see. So that went on with pantomimes. You had people like the Radio Follies appearing there. You had shows on the beach in an area called the Happy Valley, opposite Cartmore Road and Lightburn Avenue, in the midst of the sandhills. Auditions and children's talent shows. And if it rained, they all packed up and went to the Ashton Theatre and did matinee performances. And on there, they had, for instance, the Radio Follies come on, all dressed up as like the Pierrot costumes. They'd come on, the Radio Follies are here again, and then the curtain would, one of the curtains would close and one chap would come on and he'd say, "Now we're going to have the smallest performer in the world." And the curtain would open and there was this little chap. He wasn't really little, he was kneeling on a pair of slippers. And all the kids on the front row would say, "He's not the smallest fella, we can see he's kneeling on a pair of slippers." "Oh no he isn't, oh yes he is." And so the pantomime went on. Wonderful, hilarious.
And at about the same time as this was built, I suppose the War Memorial developed.
Oh well, yes, the War Memorial was created after, of course, the First World War. That was built, probably about 1919, something like that. And I think, from memory, in those days, it cost £15,000. And again, Ashton Williamson, Lord Ashton, paid for that. And the bronze statues there, they were fantastic. They were created by a sculptor called Marsden. Fantastic. You must go and really study the quality of those bronzes.
I've seen them.
Yes. And models of those statues are today in the Imperial War Museum in London. So well recognised are they. And while he was creating the models for those, Marsden was living with his councillor John Taylor in St.Annes Road East. He was lodging with him. And as a reward for his lodgings, he gave the family some models of the bronzes. And when I had a feature in Lancashire Life, I shouldn't be advertising, about my stories. And one of the family got on about this. She was living in Ray Green. She said, one of the family now living in Liverpool have still got one of those models of Marsden's statues. But I was never able to get back to her to say, come on, what happened to them? But what fantastic statues. And you'll notice that on top is a top of a lady holding her two arms up above like this. And I don't understand the game of bowls, but bowls were traditionally played for years in Ashton Gardens. And as a signal of one of the scores, they would say, right, the score is, and they'd look up at this statue to this lady, the score is that. Yes. Yeah, incredible. And
Yes.
that's the story of the statue.
Yeah, yeah,
Wonderful material.
yeah. Well, that is a good place to pause for now.
Pause.
We'll continue later.
Later, thank you.
Yeah.